Arianna, it's good to see you. Thank you for doing this.
You too, Stephanie. Great to see you.
So, as many of our audience members know, Thrive Global works with some of the world's leading organizations on how to basically help their employees with wellness and a lot of employee stress issues that they're dealing with. These companies are by definition employee first types of organizations, but what are you seeing from some of the clients you work with as they try to help their people navigate through this incredibly difficult time?
Stephanie, what we are seeing is, first of all, the primacy of the CHRO, the head of the people function, and has now become really the most important executive next to the CEO, because the health and wellness of employees has gone from a nice to have, a nice benefit, to imperative and directly connected to the health of the business. In a sense, we have been arguing that that's always the case, but now we don't have to argue it anymore. It's totally clear that if companies cannot get the health and well-being of employees right, it's going to have a dramatic impact on the business. And we are recognizing now more and more that it's not just about the physical health and well-being, but the mental resilience. So we are working with a lot of companies, like Accenture, Salesforce, Bank of America, Walmart, both about what they are offering their employees working remote, but also how they are preparing to return to offices. And there is obviously all the physical preparations, the elevator protocols and the masks and the Pepsi, not Pepsi, the glass, whatever glasses they're using to protect people. But the growing recognition is that they also have to address the stress levels and the mental resilience of employees returning to work with their own fears and anxieties.
And to what extent do you think that this new awakening of the importance of the CHRO, this new emphasis on employee mental health well-being, will be permanent? How do we ensure that companies maintain that primacy of the CHRO, maintain that emphasis on employee well-being, holistic well-being, and not backslide when we're back to business as usual?
Well, Stephanie, I think this is up to all of us. In a sense, this is like a crucible time, a time of intense trial, many losses, loss of loved ones, loss of jobs, anxiety, insecurity. But also, it's a great time for fundamental changes that really should have happened even before the coronavirus pandemic. But change is always incredibly hard, and it requires a catalyst. And now we have a catalyst. And very specifically, we had two crises before COVID-19. This was, first of all, the mental health crisis, and second, the skyrocketing increase in chronic diseases, like diabetes, obesity, hypertension, heart disease. And we talk about flattening the coronavirus curve, but we also need to flatten the chronic diseases curve and the mental health curve. And we have an opportunity to start practicing these healthier habits now and establishing new practices within organizations so that when we come out of it, we are actually stronger, and we've built gradually a world that is more fair, more just, and less plagued by these diseases, physical and mental, that are clearly unsustainable.
Arianna, a lot of the participants in Collision are founders. They are the CEOs running very small, fast growing companies. they may be listening to you and thinking, well, Accenture, Salesforce, these are big organizations. They have the wherewithal to start putting in these policies. I'm just trying to keep my business alive. What are the things that founders and young companies can do right now to help ensure that as they grow, they have the processes and the fundamentals in place?
That's a great question, Stephanie. And actually, the first thing that they need to do, as I had to do as a founder, is a mindset shift. We need to stop believing a collective delusion that in order to be a very successful founder, you need to be always on, you need to be available 24/7, you have to basically deprioritize yourself, because that's totally against all the latest science and against all the data. And I think we need to look at all the data. First of all, more than 3/4 of startups fail. So maybe there's a connection between all those sleep deprived, exhausted founders making bad decisions and the rate of failure. Secondly, we know that when we are exhausted and depleted, the first things that are sacrificed are our creativity and our ability to innovate and make good decisions. And these, of course, are critical for any entrepreneur. So maybe this is also the ideal time for founders to look at the data, since we have a moment to pause and reflect, and recognize that when they take better care of themselves, as they say on airplanes, when they put their own oxygen mask on first, they're actually going to do much better by the business. And at Thrive, we have a behavior change app that breaks this into 4 journeys. Recharge, which is sleep, and 60-second recovery breaks during the day. Fuel, which is nutrition, exercise. Connect, which of course is all the more important at this time. And focus. We're seeing how growing levels of stress make it harder for us to focus and be productive. And the way to advance on these journeys is through microsteps. And that's really something very important for founders to remember. This is not about big New Year resolutions. This is not about an hour in the gym every day. This is about taking 60 seconds before you start your day, before you go to your phone, to focus on your breathing or on what you're grateful for, or disconnecting from your phone at night so you can actually fully get a recharging night's sleep. So everything we're doing is broken down into what we call micro steps, too small to fail.
What are some of your favorite microsteps, Arianna? Are there things that you are embracing in this time of quarantine and sheltering in place that have helped you maintain your ability to reconnect and recharge?
Yes, actually, Stephanie, my favorite microstep is around gratitude, because gratitude has been found to be the greatest antidote to stress and anxiety. And these times are stressful and full of anxiety. So I try to remember what I'm grateful for when I do things that don't require using my mind, like washing my hands, brushing my teeth, washing the dishes. And it's kind of amazing. And again, the science tells us that this practice builds like new neural pathways in the brain. And we need that. Otherwise, the default position of the brain during times like that is negative bias, anxiety, all of which exacerbate the levels of stress we are under, all of which exacerbate how unproductive we are.
When we were talking about founders, you mentioned that there needs to be a mindset shift, particularly among entrepreneurs who are about as go-go as it comes. Are you seeing among your broad swath of clients a shift in expectations around productivity? are companies starting to do things to enforce or ensure that their employees are shutting down, are taking time off, are taking care of themselves? And again, are these changes that they're deploying because we're in a time of extreme stress, or do you think that these are fundamental shifts in the way people think about work-life balance?
Well, like with everything, Stephanie, a time of profound change in terms of cultural assumptions um, covers the waterfront. So even before the pandemic, we had multiple behaviors coexisting. We are working with a lot of founders also at Thrive, like Expanse, for example, the cybersecurity startup. Tim Jr. has written on Thrive about how he recognized that when he and his team um, take care of themselves, they're actually more effective, more creative, more productive. And so, what we do is we collect these stories because we are finding that there's nothing more powerful than stories from peers about what they're doing to open up our perception to another way of living and working.
It's amazing how powerful those stories are. And I've been amazed at how sports figures, for example, have really opened up about their mental health issues and their challenges with dealing with pressure. I imagine that there are wonderful corporate stories to be told in the same vein.
Absolutely. And also among leaders, because there is a sort of similarity in terms of perception among senior executives in these companies. I was doing a webinar, for example, with Accenture's global management team that runs the company, and Ellen Shook, the head of HR, said, I can't really go out for a walk. He said, there's so much happening. Basically, she had the whole burden of responsibility for all the 500,000 Accenture employees. And when we reframed that, it was game changing. She now talks about how she hasn't missed a walk for the last 45 days. She keeps track of it and how much more productive and effective she has been. So that's where, again, athletes come into it, because they have very clearly made the connection between performance and recovery. That there is a connection between how good they are, how great their stats are, and you have the measurements and how much sleep they got, what they ate, how much they took care of themselves. And actually, we have a lot of investors who are athletes, like Kevin Durant and Andre Iguodala and the San Francisco 49ers, because they have a lot of data that shows that connection.
Arianna, what are you hearing from your clients, and how are you advising them on the challenges, the special challenges that working parents are facing in this time of crisis? Our children are old enough that they don't need the hands-on care that our colleagues' children do, but it does seem to be a particularly difficult time for people who are full-time working parents trying to juggle childcare, schooling at home, and work. The day becomes an 18 or 20-hour day some days.
Absolutely. It's particularly stressful. And we have a whole program working from home for parents. And again, we break it down to these micro steps. A lot of scheduling and planning from the day before has to go into it. Your children knowing when you're available and when you're not. And the younger they are, they often can't understand why mom is at home, but she can't be with you. And it's kind of funny, actually. We're collecting a lot of ideas coming up from stressed out parents. One father told his kids that if they come in during a Zoom meeting that he has, they'll have to stay to the end. So that was the end of it. His 10-year-old walked in on a meeting, she was forced to stay there for 45 minutes, and then she went and told her siblings, don't do that. It's deadly boring. But also, PTO is very important during this time, and often working parents forget it. So we think of, we take PTO when we can go to Hawaii or the Caribbean, and people think you don't take PTO to stay at home, but do take PTO, because at least you can spend time just with your children and taking care of yourself, rather than also trying to juggle all your professional obligations.
We've talked a lot about micro changes that we as individuals can make, practicing gratitude, spending the time that you would be brushing your teeth, thinking about the things that bring your life meaning. What are the micro steps that organizations can take? Again, you work with very progressive organizations. If they're coming to you, they are clearly of a mindset to start to make some shifts. But for the companies and executives who are listening in on this session, whose organizations may be a little bit more traditional, what are some of the small things that they can encourage their companies to do that will eventually get that muscle working?
Actually, Stephanie, we are working with very many, very traditional organizations doing extraordinary things. Let me give you an example. Walmart. We are on a journey with all their HR team. It started again, which we find amazingly significant and having the biggest impact when it starts at the top. So Julie Murphy, who runs HR for America, she has about 1,000 people in her HR organization. She started with a 7-day journey with Thrive for her and her direct reports. And it's really working through the Microsteps in the app, but also having a 15-minute stand-up every morning where they discussed what Microsteps they were working on, what was happening with them. Then they would publish their stories in the app, and they would have available coaching and with our coaches. I was available, and then we ended the 7 days with an hour webinar where we discussed everything. Now this is cascading into 21-day journeys across the entire organization, and we just launched that today. The goal then is to cascade to the whole company. But what is very kind of inspiring here is that it starts with the people who are in charge of the culture. So they are going to be demonstrating it. They are going to be passionate about the change it has made in their lives, both professionally and personally, so they can be great advocates for what they want to see in the company.
It is amazing how the proliferation of micro changes add up to a macro change.
Yes.
Arianna, final question. You talked about the time that we're in now as a crucible. The writer Arundhati Roy has talked about this as a portal between an old world and a new world. What is your hope for what will emerge from this incredibly challenging time? What will we take away from it that will be lasting, that you are optimistic about?
Actually, Arundhati's quote is my favorite quote about the times. I completely agree with her that it is a portal. And now she says, it is up to us to leave behind all the things that were not working and go through the portal to the new world that, as she says, we need to imagine, fight for, and build together. And I feel like I have these two emotions at the same time, you know, a lot of grief for all the losses. It's really hard not to be overwhelmed by it sometimes, but also incredible optimism for the possibilities ahead. It's up to us. It's not going to happen automatically. But we have this opportunity. And I'm seeing such incredible steps taken by company leaders that I feel are going to be game changing in terms of the world we're building.
Arianna, thank you for your time today. This was wonderful, and I look forward to hearing more about this portal into the new world that we'll all be building together.
You'll be part of building it, Stephanie. Thank you.